Hello, everyone. I'm Emily, and today we're going to talk about the night my 16-year-old daughter saved me from a betrayal I never saw coming at my parents' 40th anniversary celebration. Imagine a country club bathed in golden light, crystal chandeliers shimmering overhead, and laughter drifting through the warm summer air. Yet beneath the sparkle lay a current of unease I couldn't yet name. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. The story ends here. If you found this video meaningful, be sure to subscribe to support the channel and stay tuned for upcoming videos. Wishing you all the best. From the moment I stepped into the Oak Ridge Country Club that July evening, something felt off. I adjusted the emerald green dress my mom had insisted I wear. She swore the color would bring out my eyes, and forced myself to smile as I approached the grand entrance, where my parents stood greeting guests like royalty. My mother, Diana, air-kissed my cheek with that practiced perfection she'd honed over decades of charity galas. My father, Richard, in his tuxedo, barely glanced at me before whisking my younger son, Ethan, 8 years old, into his arms, declaring him the future of Wallace Enterprises. My chest tightened, but I brushed it off. After all, this was their night to shine. I'm 34, a freelance graphic designer and part-time gallery assistant since my divorce from Nathan Pearson. Back then, I thought losing him would be the hard part, the public humiliation, the financial strain, moving from our spacious colonial home into a modest 3-bedroom apartment with my 2 children, ruthless reality check in action. But within 10 minutes of arriving, I realized the louder danger sometimes wears a polite smile. "Emily, darling," my mother cooed, running a manicured hand down my arm. "You look radiant." She glanced at Madison, my perceptive, strong-willed 16-year-old, who stood off to the side, clutching a small clutch purse and giving my mother's praise nothing more than a polite nod. Madison's green-gray eyes flicked between me and the entrance, as if anticipating something not yet revealed. Smiling, I gave my daughter's arm a squeeze. "Thanks, Mom. Madison, how are you feeling? Are you excited?" Her lips curved into a faint half smile, but her fingers tightened on the strap of her clutch. "I'm fine. It's beautiful. Beautiful." That was the first of many dissonant notes that night. Everything perfect on the surface, notes of discord, hiding in the arrangements of white roses and lilies, in the gentle hum of the string quartet that never quite matched the mood. As we wove through the crowd of over 100 guests, family friends, business associates, distant cousins, I tried to focus on the reason we were there, celebrating my parents' enduring marriage. But the moment someone congratulated me on handling the divorce so gracefully, I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Isn't that the PG-13 version of, "Your world fell apart and you didn't crumble"? The polite laughter that followed felt like nails tapping on my spine. By the time the anniversary cake appeared, 40 years in the making, an ivory masterpiece adorned with sugar pearls, I'd already clocked half a dozen interactions that left me hollow. Relatives expressing sympathy, strangers offering unsolicited career advice, my parents murmuring about ensuring legacies. Madison, meanwhile, drifted toward the corridors leading to the terrace, eyes alert, posture tense. She wasn't like me. She didn't gloss over oddities with practiced grace. Quirky sidebar, she once memorized the serial numbers of her favorite books, just in case, because she believes details reveal truths adults hide. A cousin leaned in to whisper a gossip-worthy rumor. "Your dad's been more generous to Ethan than to any of his other grandkids. You know how traditional he is." I forced a chuckle and patted Ethan's shoulder. He looked up, bright-eyed, clutching a tiny party favor shaped like a golden key. "Look, Mom, Grandpa says there's a special surprise for me later." His innocence cracked something inside me, the realization that my own child was already being groomed as the heir to a fortune his aunt had been promised since birth. Madison reappeared beside me, phone in hand, thumb tapping the screen. Her expression was serious. "Mom, pay attention to the speakers." I followed her gaze, my father ascending to make a toast. Polite applause filled the room as he raised his glass, eyes sweeping over the crowd before settling, ever so briefly, on Nathan, my ex, who stood at the back with his fiancée, Kayla. The air shifted like a silent gasp. An argument within me flared. How could they invite someone who'd torn our family apart? This was supposed to be about 40 years of love and mutual respect, not about asset transfers or custody schemes hidden behind champagne toasts. Yet here he was, welcomed like a prodigal son. My mother's shoulders lifted in that imperious shrug that meant, bygones, darling. Madison's voice broke through my reverie. Mom, look. She pointed discreetly toward a table where red sticky flags marked stacks of papers, property deeds, trust documents, custody petitions, all bearing my name and Nathan's. The betrayal I sensed at our doorstep was now glaring at me across the room, each paper a dagger in my unsuspecting heart. I realized in that instant that this magnificent celebration was a facade for something far darker, an orchestrated performance designed to isolate me, pit my children against me, and rearrange our lives in service of their legacy. Madison, ever the detective, had spotted the subtext I'd ignored, the way the plants were placed, the hushed side conversations, the favoring of an ex over a daughter. My pulse pounded as I caught my daughter's eye and nodded. She gave me a firm squeeze. Whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. And that, dear friends, is where the real story begins. I grew up believing love was a ledger, where every affection came with a line item, and every disappointment was meticulously filed away for future reference. My name is Emily, and in my parents' affluent New England household, emotions were never bestowed freely. They were earned. My father, Richard Wallace, built his real estate empire from the ground up, towering glass and steel investments that gleamed as trophies of his ambition. My mother, Diana, managed the family's social capital with military precision. Every charity gala, every society dinner, every whispered compliment or slight was choreographed like a ballet. Affection arrived only when I hit the right marks. Top grades, prestigious internships, engagements made to mutual benefit. If I faltered, disappointments were cataloged like misfiled receipts, and I learned early that mistakes were never forgotten. By the time I married Nathan Pearson, son of one of Dad's closest associates, I'd spent 2 decades auditioning for their approval. Nathan ticked every box. Handsome, ambitious, an MBA from Stanford, charm practiced at weekend mixers. The Wallace matriarch and patriarch couldn't have been prouder when we said, I do. For 10 years, I believed I had finally demonstrated that I was worthy. Behind the scenes, though, that perfection demanded compliance. My career as a graphic designer was tolerated only so long as it didn't eclipse Nathan's corporate ascent. My opinions stayed within the neat boundaries my parents drew. I learned that family support meant nodding at their ideas, even when I disagreed. After the divorce, when I uncovered Nathan's affair with his 25-year-old assistant, Kayla, the facade collapsed. My world imploded in legal filings and bruised egos. Overnight, I went from daughter of the billionaire to struggling single mother. I swapped our colonial home for a modest 3-bedroom apartment. I split custody of my 2 children, Madison, my perceptive, skeptical 16-year-old, and Ethan, my gentle 8-year-old. I juggled freelance graphic design gigs with my gallery job, answering to editors who cared only about deadlines, not my pedigree. To my surprise, my parents stepped forward with calls and gifts and invitations. It felt like a mother lode of validation, until Madison watched me answer one more offer of Sunday dinner with a wary eye. They look at you like you're a project they're trying to fix, she whispered one evening as I thanked my mother for sending Ethan a care package. They want to rebuild you into the daughter they originally imagined. I brushed it off, insisting they're showing love in their own way. But Madison's half smile told me she wasn't fooled. Their Sunday dinners became a tension-filled ritual. Ethan thrived under their supervision, fishing trips, baseball games, shopping sprees, while Madison made excuses about homework or friends. When forced to attend, she greeted her grandparents politely, but remained an observer, not a participant. At the head of their mahogany table, my father would ruffle Ethan's hair and whisper about future legacy roles, while I sank into the chair beside Madison, playing along with their conversation about the importance of family traditions, as if I hadn't just weathered emotional betrayals. Madison's quiet resistance grew contagious. She noticed when my father's gaze lingered on Nathan's wedding photos in the hallway, images that subtly rewrote my past into a perfect chapter, complete, happy, consensual with their vision, while omitting the messy realities of my life. She saw the way my mother's compliments stung like poison-tipped arrows. "Such resilience, Emily," Diana would say, tracing the contours of my latest freelance project, as if my struggle was some quaint hobby mislabeled bravery. Betrayal first whispered in the corners of those dinners. The way a distant cousin mentioned that my father was worried about the Wallace legacy, slipping through cracks caused by divorce, or how an old family friend confided that generous college funds for grandchildren were being reevaluated. Each remark felt like salt in a wound. I wanted to believe my parents supported me unconditionally, yet every gesture carried a tacit clause: stay within the bounds they set, or risk losing more than their affection. Madison's instincts sharpened on those nights. One evening, after a dinner where my father introduced Ethan to the family attorney in tow, Madison slipped away and returned with a slight tremor in her eyes. "Mom," she murmured, "does Grandpa always bring his lawyer when he wants to discuss the future?" Her words landed like a pebble dropped into still water, creating ripples of suspicion. I forced a laugh and said, "He's just thorough." But inside, I felt the chill of doubt slide down my spine. I started to notice the rituals. My mother inspecting my apartment during surprise visits, remarking on every paint color and art print with subtle critique. My father insisting on reviewing bank statements to ensure everything's in order before agreeing to help with college tuition. The edge of every offer was coded in a fine print they never quite disclosed. Madison would catch me gripping my credit card mail and tilt her head. "They're doing the same thing with you they did with Aunt Samantha," she said quietly, referencing her great-aunt who had been exiled from the family for challenging trust decisions years ago. My heart skipped. Why hadn't I seen this pattern? I love my parents. I always will. But I could no longer ignore the tension that hummed beneath their surface civility. Their generosity felt like leverage. Their interest felt like oversight. Each gift, each invitation to dine at the head table came with invisible chains. I realized that when they said, "We're here for you," they meant, "We're keeping an eye on you." This revelation unsettled me more than Nathan's betrayal. Betrayal by blood, I decided, could hurt far deeper. Amid this storm, Madison whispered conspiratorial counsel. Her research on trusts, her late-night phone calls with Aunt Samantha, her uncanny ability to spot red flags in family dynamics. I followed her guidance hesitantly, as if crossing a boundary I'd never noticed before. No longer would I smile brightly while they measured my worth. No longer would I pretend that every offer of help wasn't also a veiled attempt to secure obedience. In the days leading up to their anniversary celebration, my heart pounded with mixed anticipation and dread. I helped with invitations and menu choices, altering my old dresses to fit their exacting standards. But all the while, Madison's cautionary gaze reminded me, this wasn't simply a party. It was a test, a trial, a carefully staged performance designed to reaffirm their control. That warm July evening, I walked into the country club carrying decades of hope and fear in equal measure. I told myself I was prepared. I wasn't. But as I stepped across that threshold, I resolved I would no longer be merely an audience to their script. I would claim my own lines. And whether they cheered or recoiled, I would no longer play the part of the compliant daughter. By the week before the celebration, every waking moment seemed consumed by one question. How can I make this night flawless? I spent mornings rehearsing pleasantries. I'd nod at the right moments, laugh on cue, and manage to slip in a compliment or two about how their decorations were breathtaking. Afternoons were a whirlwind of menu tastings at Burroughs & Co., where the chef offered miniature lamb chops and canapés that I sampled with polite enthusiasm. Evenings were reserved for frantic dress fittings. The emerald green gown altered yet again to accommodate my shifting weight, the hem let out by 2 inches, the neckline subtly reinforced so I could breathe without fear of any wardrobe malfunction mid-toast. All of this, I believed, would prove that I was the daughter my parents always hoped I'd be, the one who showed up, smiled brilliantly, and never caused a scandal. Madison hovered on the sidelines of every activity, her skepticism as tangible as the chiffon ribbons I tied on party favors. One afternoon, she trailed me into the dusty storage room at my apartment complex, where I'd piled boxes of family photos and mementos I planned to arrange in a film strip-style timeline on display. "Why do you want to show them our entire history?" she asked, voice soft but edged with challenge. I glanced at her, paint specks on my apron, and offered what felt like the only reasonable answer. Because it's their anniversary. It's about the past 40 years of family. She crossed her arms, eyebrow raised. Or maybe it's about controlling that narrative. I laughed it off, but her words lingered in my mind like the faint scent of the roses I'd ordered for each table centerpiece. In truth, I shared her anxiety. My parents didn't believe in coincidences, and I suspected they would approve only the story they wanted told. When I showed them the photo timeline, images of my childhood birthday parties, my wedding day, Ethan's baby dedication, they offered polite nods and made one or two helpful suggestions, like perhaps include more shots of the grandkids with your brother's family. Their eyes never quite met mine. They flicked to the corners of the frames, as if looking for hidden faults. Oddly, it felt less like collaboration and more like an audit. One evening, as I taped place cards to miniature eucalyptus sprigs, Madison studied me from across the table. "I don't like those cards," she said, tapping a scalloped edge with her fingertip. "Too fancy. They make it look like a competition." I sighed, tucking a stray hair behind my ear. "It's a country club, kid. Fancy is the point." She didn't back down. "Competing for their favor," she countered. "It's the same thing." Her unwillingness to ignore the undercurrents transformed our preparations into covert operations. Under the guise of helping with the guest list, she scrolled through my parents' emailed RSVP notes, carefully saved in a folder titled WC 40th Anniversary, and jotted down names of people who always had their ear. Old business partners, the treasurer of the Eastern Trust, even my father's golf buddies. "These are the real guests of honor," she murmured, circling names with a black Sharpie. "Not us." I admired her focus, but part of me ached for the carefree daughter I used to be, the one who believed every warm invitation was genuine. Now, invitation after invitation felt like a ledger entry. They invited you to curry favor, or to watch your reaction, or to gauge your gratitude. Even my own helpful contributions, picture albums, menu recommendations, playlist suggestions, were being quietly evaluated. Then came the evening I discovered the first truly alarming red flag. I'd left my laptop open to proofread the last draft of my thank you speech, 3 paragraphs about gratitude, 1 about family bonds, when I heard a soft beep beep from my daughter's phone. Out of curiosity, I glanced at her screen. She'd sent a text to someone named Samantha Wall, which read, "I just saved Mom from a trap. We'll fill you in soon." My heart skipped. Samantha Wall? My Aunt Samantha's been estranged for 15 years, branded unstable after challenging Dad's trust decisions and swiftly cut off. I asked Madison to show me the entire message thread, but she hesitated. "I'll tell you later," she said, flipping her phone closed like it was above my clearance level. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, listening to the hum of the apartment's old radiator, picturing the stage perfection of the country club ballroom. I debated whether to confront my daughter, demand explanations for her secretive texts, or pretend ignorance and trust that she'd share when the time was right. In the end, I chose both. I approached her gently the next morning, over bowls of cereal and lukewarm coffee, and said, "I know you're worried, but we're doing this for a celebration, not a war." She looked at me, that fierce intelligence shining in her eyes, and said, "Sometimes to keep from losing, you have to fight." That phrase, "fight to win," echoed in my mind as I wiped cereal off the counter. In the days that followed, I tried to balance optimism with vigilant caution. I coordinated with the florist to add more white lilies to the terrace arrangements, believing the stark purity would contrast beautifully with the grandpa's remark, "White lilies symbolize renewal, dear Emily," and hoping for some genuine warmth in return. Madison bought me a jade bracelet from an online artisan market as a good luck charm. "It'll protect you," she said. I wore it everywhere, even during a final dress rehearsal in front of my bathroom mirror. The bracelet's smooth green surface clicked against my wrist whenever I brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, reminding me that I had an ally stronger than any couture gown. I also spent afternoons reviewing my father's old letters that I'd archived, handwritten notes about strategy, market analyses, and occasional mentions of keeping certain heirs in check. In one letter from 1998, he praised my Aunt Samantha's eye for design, but ended with a chilling phrase, Better to keep her creativity at bay for the sake of family unity. I folded the yellowed paper carefully and slipped it into a protective sleeve. There was no denying the pattern. Any family member who strayed from Dad's vision had been relegated, silenced, or worse. More than once, I caught myself drafting a mental speech of revenge, imagining the hush that would fall if I stood up mid-toast and revealed every hidden motive, every underhanded plan, every word they thought I hadn't read. But revenge rarely fits on cue. Instead, I resolved to use preparation as my shield rather than retaliation. If this evening were intended to trap me, I would outmaneuver them with calm precision and a well-defined script of my own. Finally, the day arrived. As I stepped into the chauffeured car that would take Madison and me to the country club, I breathed deeply and adjusted the jade bracelet on my wrist. Madison sat beside me, clutching her phone and her black Sharpie. Ready, she said, to mark any further anomalies. In her backpack, she carried a small voice recorder, which she'd tested the night before. Just in case, she told me with a half smile that was equal parts concern and determination. When the gates opened and we pulled into the circular driveway, the scent of lilies and cedar greeted us. I smoothed my skirts and forced myself to smile. If they wanted a show, I would give them one, but on my terms. Madison slipped her arm through mine, her whisper soft. Remember, look for the signals, not the smiles. And as we reached the grand entrance, where white roses framed the doorway like sentries, I realized that while I'd spent days preparing decorations and speeches, my daughter's vigilance had prepared me for the real event, the unveiling of their true intentions. When the doors to the ballroom swung open, I felt that familiar flutter of nerves mixed with anticipation, like the moment before the curtain rises on a show you've rehearsed 100 times but still can't predict. Madison squeezed my hand as we stepped inside. The warm glow of chandeliers, the soft murmur of well-dressed guests, and the sweet scent of roses greeted us. But something else hovered in the air, a tension I couldn't quite place until my eyes locked on the entrance. There, flanked by hotel staff in crisp uniforms, stood Nathan Pearson in a tailored navy suit that fit him like a second skin, and beside him, Kayla, radiant in a designer sheath dress that shimmered under the lights. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves, and her confidence was like armor. They moved forward with easy smiles, as though they belonged to some circle I had never been invited to. My breath caught, and for a second I forgot to inhale. Madison tensed beside me. "Did you know they were coming?" she whispered, her voice low but urgent. I shook my head, my throat suddenly dry. My mother's voice carried from behind me. "Emily, darling, look who's decided to join us." I heard her name, but the words felt distant. I watched as Nathan received an enthusiastic hug from my father, an embrace that tasted like betrayal. My mother's lips curved into a polite smile as she tucked an arm around Kayla's waist. "You look stunning, Kayla," she cooed. "Absolutely perfect for family occasions." Perfect. That word felt like a knife. Perfect engagement announcements, perfect anniversary speeches, perfect daughter replacements. Something about the staged warmth made my skin crawl. I tightened my grip on Madison's hand, feeling the cold press of her Sharpie against my palm. A small reminder of her vigilance. I tried to ground myself in normal conversation as we moved deeper into the room. An aunt breezed past with a tray of champagne flutes. I accepted one, my fingers brushing the glass stem as I forced a smile. "How wonderful to see you both," I said, addressing Nathan and Kayla. His smile flickered, polite but unreadable. "Emily," he said, voice smooth, "it's good to see you too." His eyes didn't hold mine. They skimmed my shoulders, perhaps sizing up the emerald green dress that my mother insisted would bring out my eyes. I wondered if he was judging me for wearing it, whether it reminded him of better times or fueled his list of emotional instability, as I'd heard whispered in legal drafts. Mid-sip, I noticed Madison slipping her phone into her pocket. It was an almost imperceptible gesture, but I knew she had been recording. She was determined to catch every nuance. That act, quiet, concealed, felt strangely comforting. It was her way of saying, "I've got your back, Mom. I see it all." Behind the polished veneer of hugs and hellos, an undercurrent of calculation pulsed through the room. I watched Nathan and my father in conversation by the head table. Their heads bent close, voices low. My eyesight flicked to Kayla, who was chatting animatedly with my mother about charity fundraisers. They're all in on it, I murmured to Madison. Let's not kid ourselves. Exactly, she whispered, nodding. He's here to finalize whatever plan they cooked up. I felt a bolt of anger, raw, visceral, tingling in my fingertips. I pictured the documents I'd glimpsed. Custody modifications, property transfers, sticky red flags marking clauses that granted Nathan control and cut me out. To see them laughing and clinking glasses over schemes to steal my children's inheritance was more infuriating than any affair could have been. A cousin passed by and murmured, "I'm surprised they invited Nathan. You'd think there'd be some residual tension." I heard the question as both concern and confirmation. Everyone here knew something, and I was the only one playing dumb. I squared my shoulders. If they wanted a show, they'd get one. Just not the performance they expected. Revenge didn't need theatrics. It could be subtle, precise. I'd been rehearsing my speeches for days. Now I added silent vows to protect my children and expose every secret. Madison's recorder was nestled against her thigh. Her notebook lay ready to capture code words or approving nods. A server glided by with canapés, and I bit into a smoked salmon canapé, forcing myself to savor the flavor. Beneath the bite of lemon and dill, I tasted adrenaline. Guests drifted toward the dance floor, where a string quartet played a lilting waltz. My parents stood on an elevated dais, poised to deliver their carefully penned toasts. I stepped toward them, each footstep measured, my daughter at my side. My heart hammered, but my voice would be steady. Before my father spoke, he reached out and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan, oblivious, looked up at Grandpa with a smile. "Are you excited for my speech, Grandpa?" He giggled. My face warmed at the sight of my son's trust, innocence that my parents intended to exploit. But I sensed Madison's glare, fierce and protective. She wouldn't let them manipulate Ethan's adoration into leverage. My mother caught my eye and offered a silent, imperious nod, her way of testing my compliance. Instead of nodding back, I held her gaze for a full heartbeat, then turned away and tightened my grip on Madison's hand. My chest felt hollow, yet determined. I would watch their every move, capture every word, and when they thought their plan had succeeded, I'd have the evidence to dismantle it. The room hushed as my father raised his glass. Polite applause rippled out as if everyone expected him to praise my parents' 40 years of devotion. But what followed was a toast to family legacy, to wise investments, and to the future of Wallace Enterprises. With Nathan positioned at his side, Ethan in Nathan's arms, and me standing at the periphery. The realization stung. They were recasting the story of our family, casting me and Madison as supporting characters while elevating Nathan and Ethan as heirs apparent. My cheeks flooded with heat, but I forced a calm smile. I looked at Madison for strength, and she nodded minutely. When the applause died down, I raised my glass too, voice soft but clear. To love that endures challenges, to truth that endures betrayal, and to family bonds that we choose to honor. My words were vague enough to elude immediate protest, but sharp enough that a few eyebrows rose. Nathan offered a polite toast in return, his words measured, his smile too bright. Kayla clapped enthusiastically beside him. My mother exchanged a quick glance with my father, a flicker of surprise there, perhaps at my carefully veiled barb. But the show went on. After the toast, guests milled around, offering small talk. I felt Madison's recorder buzz in her purse, a reminder that the gathering was not private. I whispered to her, "Let's stick together until we've gathered everything we need." She reached beneath her dress and revealed a small packet of printed documents, photos of the red-flagged pages, time-stamped, a lifeline in the sea of performative civility. As Nathan drifted away toward the bar, I intercepted him. Standing toe-to-toe felt oddly satisfying. He gave me that practiced look as though he could read my mind. I said quietly, "Enjoying the party?" He shrugged, eyes flicking past mine to the table of business associates. "It's enlightening." "Enlightening?" I echoed, stepping closer. "Funny, that's the word I'd use for discovering that the biggest celebration of your life is a cover for your own disinheritance." His jaw tightened. That one phrase, disinheritance, hung between us. Kayla appeared, and Nathan offered her his arm. I turned away, took a breath, and found Madison's hand again. She gave me a small, proud smile. By the time the crescendo of the string quartet reached its final note and guests drifted toward dinner tables, I felt poised and vigilant. The drama at the entrance, Nathan's arrival, the forced embraces, the whispered plans, had set the stage for the rest of the evening. But now I saw the strings. I knew the choreography, and I had my own plot, written in voices recorded, in photos gathered, and in a daughter's unwavering resolve. As the evening's program continued, I slipped into my role, the composed mother, the gracious daughter, the silent observer gathering weapons for a battle they didn't realize had already begun. And in that moment, I felt a strange rush of empowerment, knowing that while they thought they controlled the narrative, they had no idea who truly held the pen. I never imagined a 16-year-old could move through a crowded ballroom like a shadow, but Madison had become exactly that, slipping past milling guests, disappearing into alcoves, and reappearing where you least expected her. While I hovered near my parents and their entourage, offering perfunctory smiles to curious cousins, Madison was busy gathering evidence. She was determined, methodical, and by the look in her eyes, practically born to detective work. It began when she excused herself from dinner under the pretense of a bathroom break. I watched her go, her emerald dress swishing against the carpet, before turning back to join a conversation about the importance of family continuity. I barely made it through the polite nodding when a server approached with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and my phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "I'm in his office. Be ready." My pulse doubled. I slipped away, clutching my clutch purse like armor, and followed her texted coordinates toward a side corridor marked private staff only. Beneath faux oil paintings and near a service elevator, I found her leaning against a polished wooden door labeled Club Manager's Office. She peered inside, then turned, thumb brushing her phone's screen. "He keeps his papers here," she whispered, pushing the door just enough to slip inside. The room was surprisingly small, furnished with a tidy desk, a leather chair, and framed certificates on the wall. Madison moved like lightning, flipping on the desk lamp and rifling through a stack of folders stamped Wallace Realty. I felt my heart clench. These weren't just party programs. They were legal documents, trust papers, and handwritten notes in my father's precise script. She held up a page marked with red sticky flags. "Look." My breath caught as I read terms like transfer of title, custodial rights amendment, and beneficiary amendment, Emily, removal. The handwriting in the margins made it even more chilling. Mom's emotional instability. Advantage, Nathan Pearson. Ensure minors remain under Wallace control. My fingers trembled around my phone. This was proof they planned to rewrite our futures. Madison's eyes glittered as she snapped photos. "I've got timestamps and annotations," she said, switching to video mode to record her hands turning pages, "in case they claim these are drafts." Her voice was steady, resolute. I felt a fierce surge of gratitude and pride. This was the daughter I'd raised, perceptive enough to see betrayal beneath layers of Southern hospitality. We heard footsteps in the hallway. My pulse roared. Madison shot me a quick look. "Hide." We ducked behind a tall file cabinet. The doorknob rattled. I pressed myself into the wall, wishing I'd worn sneakers instead of heels. My father's voice drifted in. "I want to finalize these arrangements tonight. After the speeches, perhaps we can discuss them over brandy." The chair scraped as he turned to leave. Madison waited until the footsteps receded, then slid out, snapping one last photo of a page labeled Immediate Action December 1st. Once the corridor was clear, she locked the door behind her with a quiet click, her phone's flashlight dancing over the keypad. We slipped back to the ballroom entrance, adrenaline buzzing like electricity in our veins. I grabbed her hand. "You're amazing," I whispered fiercely, eyes shining. She managed a tight smile. "We need to get these to Aunt Samantha and the lawyer." Back in the ballroom, I rejoined a group of corporate friends who were debating investment strategies. My mother stood nearby, praising a particularly salty gougere. I nodded along, but my mind raced. How many other secrets waited behind closed doors? How long had this been planned? I slipped Madison's PDF scans into my phone, organizing them in a hidden folder labeled Evidence. Next, I tapped on my email app and drafted a quick note. Subject: Urgent Party Documents. To A. Reeves, my attorney. I attached a handful of screenshots, keeping the descriptions clinical to avoid tipping anyone off. See attached. Evidence of proposed property and custody amendments under Wallace Realty letterhead. Timestamped, flagged. Please advise next steps. I hit send. A quiet ping confirmed delivery. Madison gave me a proud nod. "One down," she murmured, but her eyes were already scanning the room again. She knew there was more to uncover. And she was right. While guests prepared for the cake cutting, I watched her drift toward the head table, where my father had laid out a stack of printed presentation slides. She slipped under the desk and spotted a USB drive plugged into a laptop perched on a side stand. Titles like Wallace 40th Anniversary Slides and another labeled Strategic Family Meeting. With nimble fingers, she eased it free and tucked it into her clutch. "We'll need the audio files from this," she said, a whisper meant only for me. My stomach roiled. The slide deck had shown a glossy retrospective of my parents' lives. Silver wedding photos alongside family milestones, anniversaries, and birthdays. But I'd noticed odd omissions. My own photos limited to early childhood, Madison's barely visible. Those slides weren't nostalgia. They were propaganda. Madison's silent heist of data felt like reclaiming stolen memories. As the pianist struck the first notes of the cake-cutting ceremony, Madison rejoined me, clutching both the USB and her phone. She looked simultaneously exhilarated and tense. "That's everything," she said. "We have drafts, slides, recording potential." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're my hero," I said, voice thick. "Now let's finish this night." We slipped back toward the main table, where guests rose for the formal toast. I slipped the jade bracelet off and handed it to Madison. "Proof you protected me," I joked, but she shook her head. "Keep it. You're still wearing this." She slipped it back onto my wrist, caressing the smooth stone. I felt steadier, anchored by her presence. My father rose, glass aloft. The room hushed. I saw Nathan position himself at the microphone, ready to offer his own tribute. That was our cue to act. I mouthed, "Let's chat after," and Madison gave the tiniest nod. We took our places, knowing the real conversation would happen later, in private with our team of allies. As speeches began, I focused on projecting calm authority. I recited lines about gratitude and love, but in my mind, I was drafting a letter to the court, weaving in every detail Madison had uncovered. Each sentence would invalidate the narrative they tried to spin. Every mention of family unity would be answered with proof of plotting. And when I laid out that case, there would be no room for manipulation. By the time the cake was cut and favors handed out, I felt a shift inside me. No longer the compliant daughter, eager to please, but a strategist guarding her family's future. Madison slipped me a thumbs up as we exchanged subtle glances. The room was still singing "Happy Anniversary" and clicking cameras. To the world, this was just another grand social spectacle. But to us, it was the moment our investigation turned the tide. With the evidence secured, I knew the battle had only begun. But I also knew that thanks to Madison's relentless pursuit of the truth, I finally had the ammunition to fight back. And in the hushed brightness of those chandeliers, beneath the hopeful applause and glittering gowns, I felt something shift. The realization that courage, timing, and a sharp mind could upend even the most carefully orchestrated betrayals. The next morning dawned gray and humid, as if the weather itself hesitated to join our fight. I sat at the kitchen table in my modest apartment, fresh coffee steaming beside me, as I laid out the evidence Madison had captured the night before. Folder of photos, USB drive, and my phone's evidence folder brimming with screenshots. Madison perched on the edge of the table, her expression both determined and weary, clutching her phone like a talisman. "Okay," I began, clearing my throat. "First, we share everything with Jennifer Reeves." I tapped out a concise message. "Jennifer, please review attached files, property transfer drafts, custody amendment notes, slide deck, and audio recorder plan. Need strategy meeting ASAP." I sent it off and waited, stomach nodding as the email whooshed into the ether. "While we wait," Madison said, "we contact Aunt Samantha." Her fingers flew as she drafted a message to my estranged sister. "Samantha, this is Emily. Madison and I have uncovered serious documents. Please call me as soon as you can." She looked up, eyes bright with hope. "She'll know what to do." Moments later, my phone buzzed. Jennifer's reply. She'd reviewed the attachments overnight and suggested an in-person meeting, today at 3 p.m. in her downtown office. She warned that the evidence was compelling but sensitive, and that we needed to prepare formal affidavits. I exhaled, relief washing through me. We had a plan. Madison and I moved into high gear. We drafted bullet points for our meeting with Jennifer. 1. Documented property transfer clauses removing me as beneficiary. 2. Custody amendment drafts favoring Nathan. 3. Slide deck evidence of narrative manipulation. 4. Aunt Samantha's testimony on past family trust sabotage. 5. Plan for supervised visitation proposals. While we worked, Madison's phone rang. Aunt Samantha, voice thick with emotion. Samantha's words poured out. "I'm so sorry you went through this, Emily. Dad did the same to me. You need a neutral trustee and evidence in the court record." Her calm, seasoned advice grounded me. She'd connect us to her attorney, and she'd testify. I felt a wave of gratitude. After 15 years, this sister was my ally. By 1:30 p.m., Madison and I piled into the Honda Accord, laptop, documents, and both children's school sign-out slips in hand. At Jennifer Reeves's unassuming office, we were greeted warmly. Jennifer's modest meeting room contained a round table and a whiteboard. She motioned us in and immediately began reviewing the points we'd prepared. "Your evidence is airtight," she said, nodding. "But timing is everything. We'll file for temporary injunction to block any property transfers and immediately notify the court of your parents' and Nathan's schemes. I'll draft affidavits, and Samantha's testimony can be notarized today. Then we request a hearing within 10 days. Madison slid the USB drive across the table. "And this is the slide deck," she said. "It shows how they recast the family narrative to marginalize us." Jennifer plugged it into her laptop, brows furrowing as she clicked through images, omitting Emily and Madison. "Disgusting," she murmured. "We'll include this in our memorandum of contempt. This is psychological manipulation of children for financial gain." Jennifer stood and grabbed a stack of official-looking affidavit forms. "I need your sworn statements," she said, placing pens at each spot. "Emily, you'll attest to discovering these documents and the betrayal. Madison, you'll attest to witnessing and collecting evidence. Samantha will sign tomorrow in Colorado, and Nathan, we'll serve him notice along with your parents. Then we can seek to freeze certain trust assets." I signed, reading each line carefully before committing my name. Madison signed too, self-conscious but resolute. The weight of our signatures struck me. This was the alchemy of turning private pain into legal power. After the signing, Jennifer outlined the next steps. File injunction today. Block any transfers or amendments without Emily's consent. Serve notice to parents and Nathan via process server to their law firm. Request status conference within 10 days. Draft supervised visitation order. Propose a third-party counselor present when grandparents see the kids. Coordinate Samantha's deposition. Scheduled tomorrow via video conference. We left Jennifer's office feeling both empowered and exhausted. Outside, the city's hustle resumed unabated. Cars honking, people rushing by. Yet we carried a private determination that transcended the urban din. On the drive home, Madison broke the silence. "Mom, I'm proud of you. You never backed down." Her voice trembled with emotion. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I couldn't have done it without you." Back at the apartment, I carved out an hour for Ethan's homework. He surprised me with math questions, oblivious to the storm swirling around us. I answered patiently, grateful for his normalcy. In the next room, Madison typed a thank you email to Samantha and attached our signed affidavits. "Done," she said, hitting send. "Now we wait." As evening settled, Jennifer's office called. The injunction was filed and docketed for a hearing next Wednesday. Our parents and Nathan had been officially notified. The court would review our request to freeze assets and schedule a conference. It felt surreal. Just days ago, I was rehearsing a speech, and now I was on the brink of a legal showdown with my own family. Madison and I sat at the kitchen table again, a quiet ritual emerging. She with her phone screen's glow, me with my legal binder. We shared water and microwaved leftovers, leaning into a new normal where truth was our compass. I realized that our battle wasn't just about money or custody. It was about reclaiming our autonomy, redefining family on our terms. Before bed, I hugged each child, Ethan nestled against me, Madison lingering with a small smile. "Thank you," I whispered to both. They had reminded me that while betrayals cut deep, courage could cut deeper. Tomorrow, we'd continue building our case and healing our hearts. But for tonight, we rested on the strength of truth and the profound bond between mother and daughter. The crisp morning air felt strangely calm as Madison and I arrived at Jennifer Reeves's conference room 1 week later. Outside, the city bustled, but inside this glass-walled office, time seemed to slow. My parents sat across from me, Richard in a dark suit that matched his steely posture, Diana's expression carefully neutral, while Nathan hovered beside them, tension etched into his jaw. Samantha sat at my side, her posture a mirror of quiet strength that reminded me of the first time Madison had uncovered those red flag documents. Jennifer opened the meeting with deliberate calm. "Thank you all for coming," she said, voice even. "We're here to resolve outstanding matters concerning family trusts, property, and custody arrangements." She motioned to her laptop, where the slide deck Madison had recovered glowed on the screen. "Let's review these materials first." My father's cheeks tightened, but he said nothing. Jennifer clicked through images, wedding photos that omitted Madison, estate documents with Emily's name crossed out, draft petitions aiming to shift custody of Ethan. Each slide landed like a gavel's blow. When she paused, a hush fell. "This evidence," Jennifer continued, "demonstrates coordinated attempts to alter Emily's beneficiaries and manipulate the children's custody for financial control." She turned to my parents. "Mr. Wallace, can you explain these annotations in your handwriting?" My father's lips pressed together. His silence spoke volumes. Diana's breath trembled. Madison leaned forward. "Grandpa wrote notes about ensuring minors remain under Wallace control," she said softly, "and flagged clauses that remove Mom from the trust." Her voice was clear, unwavering. My father shifted in his seat. Jennifer nodded and addressed my parents directly. "Our goal is an amicable resolution, but the legal record is clear. We propose 3 binding agreements." She slid a document across the table to my mother. 1. Restoration of Emily's beneficiary rights. All assets originally designated for Miss Emily remain intact, governed by neutral third-party trustees. 2. Equal beneficiary status for both children. Madison and Ethan shall have equal standing in any current and future trusts or inheritances, with transparent accounting. 3. Structured grandparent visitation. In-person visits under professional supervision for an initial 6-month period, then gradually extended as trust is rebuilt. My mother's eyes flashed indignation. "This is ridiculous," she protested. "We were merely protecting family assets." My father leaned forward, voice low. "We had your best interests at heart, Emily." I took a steadying breath. "Best interests?" I echoed. "You tried to strip me of my inheritance and use my children as leverage." My voice quivered, but my resolve was firm. "That's not protection. That's manipulation." Nathan cleared his throat. "Emily," he began, but Samantha interrupted. "You and Dad used private family events to announce outcomes you'd already arranged in secret." Her voice was calm but fierce. "I lived that betrayal 15 years ago." My father's face paled. Jennifer pressed on. "Unless there are objections, we'll finalize these terms today." She tapped her pen. "Mr. Wallace?" He exhaled and glanced at my mother. For the first time, I saw uncertainty soften his rigid mask. A long pause followed. Finally, Richard spoke, voice low. "We object to supervised visits. We are grandparents. We don't need a chaperone to see our grandchildren." His tone was more plea than command. Diana nodded, tears glistening. "That feels punitive." Jennifer responded gently. "Supervision is temporary to rebuild trust. Once we show consistent respect for Emily's decisions, supervision ends. This protects children from being used as pawns." She offered a small smile. "Are you willing to comply under those terms?" My father's shoulders sagged, and he exchanged a reluctant glance with my mother. After a beat, he said quietly, "We will comply." Diana's eyes filled, but she nodded. Jennifer reminded everyone to initial the document. My heart thudded as my parents placed their initials next to each provision. When the final copy landed in my hands, I exhaled and felt a weight lift. We moved on to the custody issue. Jennifer explained that the court would formalize a parenting plan, acknowledging both parents' rights, unaffected by grandparent visitation. Nathan leaned forward. "I agree that both parents should have equal time with Ethan." His admission felt surprisingly measured, as though the momentum of truth finally tipped him off balance. With those agreements in place, Jennifer concluded, "This is a framework for healing. The legal protections will prevent future attempts at control." She closed her laptop. "Thank you all for cooperating." My parents rose stiffly. Richard extended a hand toward me. "I'm sorry," he said haltingly. "I believed I was doing what was best." I glanced at him, then at Diana, whose shoulders shook gently. I took his hand, uncertain but determined. I accept that apology, I said softly. But we need time. Time to see that actions match words. Samantha stood and embraced me. Madison slipped her arm around my waist. Ethan peeked over the table, eyes curious but trusting. In that moment, family wasn't defined by shared blood alone, but by a commitment to honesty and respect. After the meeting, Samantha whispered in my ear, "You did it." Madison beamed, and I finally allowed myself a small, relieved smile. Outside the office, we paused in the lobby. The late afternoon sun streamed in, dust motes dancing like confetti. The world beyond these walls was the same, but inside, everything had changed. On the drive home, Madison pointed out a mural of a phoenix rising. "Fits us, right?" she said. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Exactly. In the weeks that followed, our lives settled into a new rhythm. Jennifer's court filings froze the disputed assets, and the supervised visits resumed under the gentle guidance of a child therapist. My parents arrived with flowers, offering apologies that felt more genuine than any gift could convey. Madison spent afternoons in the therapy room too, helping Ethan understand that love isn't conditional and that family means truth. I reclaimed my career with renewed confidence, negotiating gallery contracts, designing brand identities, and mentoring other freelancers. At home, I watched my children grow without fear of betrayal shadowing their smiles. Each night, I tucked them in and whispered, "We are safe and we are free." Most poignant was the day I visited the old Victorian house my parents had tried to transfer. Standing in that sunlit foyer, I traced the patterns in the hardwood floor, imagining the life I'd lived here and the life I'd build ahead. On the mantel, a single jade bracelet, Madison's gift, lay next to a family portrait that now included all four of us side by side. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of pink and gold, Madison asked, "What do you think the most important lesson is?" I thought of betrayal and resilience, of the daughter who saw what adults couldn't, and I replied, "The bravest thing we can do is trust our instincts and stand up for the truth, even when those we love most try to silence it." Madison smiled, head resting on my shoulder. I think we did that. In her eyes, I saw the legacy we'd forged, a family defined by courage, honesty, and the bonds we chose every single day. And as the twilight deepened, I felt a peace I'd never known before. The peace of a story reclaimed, of a daughter saved by her own instincts, and of a new chapter unfolding in the warmth of a love grounded in truth.